Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Michael and Patty Show. I'm Michael.
And I'm Patty.
And it's an absolutely beautiful, gorgeous day in Prince Edward Island, Canada, looking out at the Hillsborough River and the Charlottetown Yacht Club. Most of the boats are sitting here doing nothing. I think that's the main feature of owning a yacht, isn't it? Just to buy it and let it sit here?
Well, it does seem to have a lot of them just sitting in the water, but I know during the winter months when everything is frozen and there's the ice covering the harbor, this is the view and the image that I dream and look forward to every year. So it is absolutely stunning.
So we're into episode 147. We're going to get started here. Patty, someone sees an abandoned house or a vacant lot, and they're wondering if you can find out who owns it so they can contact the sellers directly and see if they want to sell. Is this something you can do?
Absolutely.
You're supposed to say, yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Like Barack Obama.
Yes, we absolutely can. In fact, I just had a call this week, so it's kind of...
I had one last week. That's why I put this on the list. It was for an abandoned house.
That's what mine was for, was an abandoned house.
Was your house in the same location as mine?
I am curious now.
So this was an abandoned house, and he said the grass was 4 feet tall. It looks like they hadn't lived there in 2 years and was wondering if they would sell and wanted the contact information from the seller because I had sold this house like 20 years ago. I sold it to somebody on the other coast, on the West Coast, and it turns out I did contact him. He had the same email address. At first, he ignored my email. So, of course, you and I, as we've discussed before, track our emails so we see when people have opened them, how many times they've opened them, if they've been forwarded. So he ignored me. So the second email I sent him, I said, why are you ignoring my first email? And he got back to me this time and he said he was going through a divorce and the wife is now in charge of the house and that's where I left it. So interesting story. Also interesting that he would have the same email address after that long, as I guess a lot of people do. I do.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I find, Michael, that people or clients of mine can be, I guess, impressed with is the fact that you still have my contact information. You still remember that. A good real estate professional will have what is called a contact relationship management system, which you obviously have. And
a CRM.
A CRM.
We call it a CRM in the business.
Absolutely, but not all our listeners are in the business. And you obviously have a very effective, good running CRM system, which allows you to be able to pull that information and keep in contact. Now, just because you had said it is a property owner in BC, I
didn't say BC, I said the West Coast.
West Coast, okay. So Alberta, BC, or it could even be, I guess, West Coast of the United States. However, the call that I had, and these clients, not clients of mine, these buyers were supposed to give me a call back, and I've not heard from them on Friday afternoon, and I was a little busy with offer presentations and that, so I'm going to touch base and circle around. I didn't record their number down or anything because I was driving when they called and started asking me questions for the property they had inquired on, and this was a really good information point and worth having a conversation with these particular tourists that are on the island right now vacationing. Is the property they are inquiring on has been owned by the same family. They are an American couple. They own 148 acres of land here. They are older, and this isn't going to be a property that somebody who's not an island resident is going to be able to just call them up and say, hey, I want to buy the property, because it has to be, as per our Land Protection Act, offered to island residents for a minimum of 90 days prior to it being allowed to be sold to a non-island resident.
Preferably on MLS.
And preferably on MLS, absolutely. So this will be worth a conversation that I'm going to have to educate these particular these consumers that have called me up, but just be mindful of that. It does need to be advertised in this particular property that also looks like it has been abandoned, and it's no surprise. They probably haven't been up in a few years, and the grass is also high.
So this 148 acres, is this contiguous?
Yes.
It's very rare to see large parcels of land in PEI. And that's why a lot of our buyers, we lose them because they're looking for hundreds of acres because they want to farm or get lost or get into forestry or whatever. We don't have these large parcels. I think my two largest parcels I've seen in my just under 30 years in this business one was 373 acres, or was it 273? It was 273. And then we surveyed it. It turned out to be 245. I actually bought this property. And then the other one was, I think, 148 acres on the water. And those are the two largest parcels I've ever seen. Most of the time, they fit under 50 acres. Would you agree?
Most of the time, yes.
What's your biggest parcel you've ever sold or listed?
The biggest parcel I've ever listed, I have listed just under 100 acres. I think it was about 97 acres on the water.
Well, I hope things pick up in the future for you. The reason is PEI was cut into these 1,000-acre chunks originally, and then it was chopped up. So that the inevitability or the ability to find a 400 or 500-acre parcel after a couple hundred years of being chopped up is fairly rare. That's why I was asking if it was one parcel or if it was chopped up in a whole bunch of little different parcels. Next, we're going to get into showing feedback. And my feelings, as always, with showing feedback, unless it's something catastrophic, it's pretty useless. Either they're going to offer on the property or they're not. And a lot of times I find, Patty, and I don't know about you, is I hate showing feedback because I find the owners or the vendors take this personal, emotional stance to the feedback, and it turns into this pointless conversation about nothing. I'll give you an example. They'll say, well, the garage is too narrow and it could have been longer. And if they painted the front door red, it would have been, we would have considered it. And then the bedroom that's on the main floor, it would be better if it was upstairs. Like stuff like this. It's just completely useless feedback. What are your thoughts? And the other thing, just before we get into that, is what I do when I hear an opinion, and this may sound cynical or twisted, is I assign a value to it. And I've learned this in business. And my value on an opinion for showing feedback most of the time is 0. Let's move on with our day. Either they're buying it or they're not. And a lot of times when they're not buying it, it's not because they didn't like the house, because they bought something they liked better, or it was priced more appropriately, or they didn't buy anything at all and they gave the agent, well, it was a fun day, we'll get back to you, and they never do and they ghost them.
Absolutely. So feedback, just for our listeners, is when a real estate professional shows a property and the seller would like the buyer's agent to give the buyer's opinion of their viewing experience. And a lot of times, like you say, it is that kind of information, or they'll just say it didn't have the layout or the floor plan. But once in a while, you'll get into almost a personal opinion dig and not something that's just very concrete, saying that I didn't like the layout, I didn't like the configuration of the space, the rooms were a little tight or smaller than what we were hoping for. Yes, this information is provided on the real estate property feature sheet that should be provided to the buyer. My feedback with regards to showing feedback or, the response from the buyer's opinion is, yes, Michael, when you rate it on a scale like you have here, 0 to 100, I wouldn't necessarily give it a 0. So yes, you are being very cynical, but I would
I'll give it a 1.
I let you speak.
I'll give it a 1.
Okay. I would give it more. I would say there is value to it, but it's 50-50. 50% of the time, you might get something of value from the buyer, and sometimes their feedback could be, in their opinion, it is priced high. I just showed a property this past week, and my clients felt the property was high. Well, guess what happened to that property? It went to multiple offers. So the buyer's opinion would probably be incorrect if it did go to multiple offers. So then it becomes an education or teaching opportunity to say, no, this is what you can expect at this price point. And that's all I take it as, is a teaching opportunity. And sometimes if the feedback is it's priced too high, as a seller, please don't assume that the buyer is putting your property down or doesn't see the value. They may just not be educated and informed. And it is a teaching opportunity. And I will say these particular clients of mine, I actually had a conversation with them outside because I never discuss price inside of a home. But we did have the conversation outside. And I did tell them, I said, well, I disagree with you. And they looked at me and they said, what, you feel this is accurately or fairly priced? And I said, absolutely. This is what you can expect a product to look like in this price point. And their response was interesting because, again, they're learning, they're trying to understand the market and maybe where they fit. Is this a product that this is the price point they want to be at? Do they want to bump their number up a little bit? Or are they comfortable in saying, well, this was the top of our market. We were expecting something better. Maybe we need to reevaluate and readjust our expectations. And it was a great opportunity. So if you're a seller and the agent isn't a confident realtor in or real estate professional in the business and is not able to have that education or conversation with their buyer client, guess what happens? That buyer's agent relays the information and says, the buyers feel it's too high. Now the seller ends up reaching out to the listing agent and saying, they feel it's priced too high. Have they been in many homes? And now you're back and forth with your listing agent. And if your listing agent isn't educated and informed, they're going to be sitting there saying, well, you know what, I'll have a conversation or I'll see. And everyone's like backpedaling and trying to figure this out. Now, if your property is priced high, and how can you determine that? You determine that if you're getting many showings or no showings and you haven't received an offer. The very fact that this particular example that I'm sharing, they felt it was priced high. Within 24 hours, it went to multiple offers, was indicative of just the opposite.
Did you tell them it went into multiples?
Yes, they do know it. It ended up receiving offers.
And what did they say at that point?
They, again, just said, I guess we are not educated enough yet, and we need to take a look. And they're going to comb through their custom collaboration site that I have set up for them, and also go through realtor.ca and do some further education and realign their expectations of their property purchase.
And the other thing that you do, and I know some agents don't, is you educate the clients from day one so they know where they fit into the market. So when they get comments like this from showings, they know based on actual fact what their property is worth, opposed to some agents that are a bunch of gunslingers that just go in there and pull a number out of the air or ask the seller what they think it's worth and use that even though it's not based in anything. That's going to lead to a lot more confusion than what you do and I do, which is sharing all the market data so they're aware either they're at market, below market, over market, depending on their motivation and their objectives.
Absolutely.
Because there are people that sell houses that have so much money, they don't care. I've seen properties sell for $2-3 million under what they paid for it. They don't care because their objective is just to quickly liquefy things, jump on the plane and escape from the law.
I'm sure that's not your clientele.
No, I was speaking about one of your last clients.
Oh, I see. It is a conversation, though, that you need to have. The other, if I can just quickly share this, I have had a client in the past. It was a seller client, and they had been through, 2 or 3 agents prior to me coming in the door. And the husband ended up pulling me aside and having a conversation with me because his wife took all the feedback to heart. Well, he had replaced the flooring a few times because the feedback was they didn't like the flooring. So she kept going out and buying new boxes of flooring and replacing it in the upstairs level in the bedroom.
Did she install it herself?
Yeah, she was doing all this herself.
Can I get her phone number? Because I have some flooring I need installed.
And I felt so bad. And They've painted multiple times the home because this buyer didn't like the color. This one thought it was too bright. This one thought it was, too dark. So this lady kept doing home modifications to accommodate a buyer that did not exist. These are simple fixes that somebody can come in, they can apply paint. They can go ahead and if they don't like the flooring, change the flooring. This is not for a seller to spiral and start making modifications to the home, which costs them money and time and stress and sleepless nights. That is not the purpose of the feedback. So if you are somebody that does not do well with negative feedback or criticism, have a conversation with your listing agent. I know my clients that can be a little sensitive, that will actually cause them to be stressed. I don't misrepresent, but I do put it through what I call the petty filter. And I simplify it so that I don't cause my clients any stress because selling and buying real estate is one of life's major stressors. It's a huge purchase and sale. No comment, no input.
It's never been stressful to me, and it hasn't been stressful to friends of mine, so you must deal with a different clientele.
Okay. I can't believe I actually made the Michael Poczynek quiet for a moment. That's actually...
I was just wondering if I should say that, but no, I don't find it stressful. But again, most of my friends are all business people, and they know to distance themselves from the emotion. They also know that just because someone has an opinion doesn't mean it's worth anything. At the end of the day, I don't really want feedback on a house I'm selling. I mean, they're offering or they're not. It's all I care about. I don't care about the story, like the story we discussed in the last episode. Oh, well, there's a high-income professional interest. Either he made an offer or he didn't. Otherwise, it's just babble-blabble. It's being used as a lever to get offers from other people, right?
Yeah, and that property is actually still on the market.
Still sitting there. We drive by it just about every day. So this high-income professional hasn't done diddly squat. But that's what I mean. Like you get these opinions that mean nothing, or they're opinions that are motivated by their own motives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about Patty not getting into email conversations with people. Many times we'll get emails, they'll have 100 different questions, there's no phone number, they want to go back and forth 85,000 times. You respond to all their questions and you don't get as much as a thank you or anything. So myself, my only email is going to be, what's your phone number? Because I'm not getting into an email conversation. Because the other thing is, you will find on rare occasions when you're dealing with someone that doesn't have all their mental faculties, aka nut jobs, 10 years later, they'll say, Patty, I have this email in front of me from 2016, and you said this about this, and this wasn't true. Have you ever had that happen?
Sort of. So when does email serve you and when does email not serve you? If your email is great when you want to make sure it is documented that you conveyed or relayed on information to a client. And emails can backfire on you if you're inserting opinions that are not founded based on fact and rules and laws, and you now are going off and down a rabbit trail of, well, I believe you can do this. I do not put any opinions in emails. If it is something that is black and white and factual, and I want to make sure that it is documented, that my client has been informed, I will, yes, have a verbal conversation, Michael, but I will also document it so that 10 years from now or 20 years from now, they're not coming back saying, you never told me, because I'm able to pull that email and say, yes, I did on this date, and you did respond to it. So I do feel email has its purpose, but I want to at least first start with the conversation to make sure that the person that is going to be receiving the email understands the information that I'm going to be relaying and conveying on to them. Or does a further explanation, or do I need to cite some sources within that so that I put the responsibility of due diligence on them to educate, Now, as per our contracts, we are not allowed to give legal, environmental, or accounting advice, and I stress that often with my clients, and I stay in my lane when it pertains to that.
But you were just walking a property with somebody showing them survey markers the other day. Isn't that like a massive no-no, walking a property, pointing out survey markers that may or may not been even part of that property and could potentially be moved?
Absolutely. So what do you do when a client calls you up and says, I want to look at a piece of land? That is something that I will be honest, I don't typically do.
Give them the app where they can walk the property and see their little people self walking the property and the lines as the government sees them.
I did share with them that I do not typically show land. However, just to have some random person walking on this property that has a bunch of neighboring properties, and the only way, because it is a treed, densely, filled with brush and very mature, high-growing brush, you would have to be walking on the adjacent properties. Well, I know one of the properties has children, so it'd be a little creepy if I'm looking out my backyard and there's some individual out there walking in my backyard. So in that instance, I did feel me being out there I was able to present, and people would say, well, I know that's listed, that I think is the real estate agent, and bring them hopefully a little bit of comfort. I did bring my roller to, walk the distance as per the survey, what, the property depth and the road frontage, and that was. Yes, we only found one survey marker, and yes, you are correct. I don't know if that survey marker is in its original place, or did someone pick it up to move it to cut the grass?
Or what happens more commonly is the survey marker you're looking at may not even be the marker for the property you're looking at. It might be something that's across the road, a laneway, or it may belong to a neighboring property.
Absolutely.
And that's been the product of a number of lawsuits. But the point being is you don't give accounting advice, environmental advice. You don't certify survey markers. It's like I said to you, and you know this, that if they want to know 100% where those markers are, they can get them placed by a surveyor.
Yeah, and that, because I could feel how important this was to this particular buyer, and I don't want to assume responsibility or liability, I said to this particular buyer client, I said, if this is important to you and you want to know absolutely, because you can pretty much see based on all the adjacent properties around, but if this is deemed important, write it into the contract, which is exactly what they opted to do, was have a clause in their agreement of purchase and sale. They want the property repinned. They want it resurveyed to make sure that they are clear as to where their property lines are. And if that's the situation and that's what's deemed important to them, make sure it's in your contract. Do not assume. I would not take any responsibility for the property lines and the boundaries.
So one closing question.
What's that?
Before we move on. How many gallons of bug spray did you have to apply to your body prior to and during the walk of this land?
That's not fair, because I did share with you that I had to put bug spray on. Like I said, it was filled with mature, soft brush, and there was some mosquitoes, and it was a damp day, which we haven't had a lot of mosquitoes this year. At least I haven't come across them. I've had 2 episodes this year, and yes, that particular day was one of them.
So one of the interesting things, getting back to the email conversations, is I was wondering if, and this is not legal advice, and this may not even be 100% confirmed, if there is in fact a statute of limitations that can be applied to a real estate transaction for the purchase of a house or land. In other words, if you do have someone that's communicating via email, you make a statement, 9.5 years later, they say, well, that statement isn't true, so we're going to go to court, or I'm going to send a lawyer after you. From my research in this province, it appears to be the state statute of limitations is 10 years. And from what I can see, that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, 10 years is a long time.
If that's the case.
But you should own what you say. If you said something
A lot of times it's taken out of context. Don't put it in email to begin with, and then you don't have this issue. Unless, of course, they're recording you, which doesn't happen a lot. But from time to time it does. But that's what I mean. Like you put something in an email that you believe 100% sincerely is correct, and then 9.5 years later they say, no, that isn't correct, and blah, blah, blah. Let's move on. Somebody asks you, will they close next year? And we'll just assume, by definition, next year is 9 months from today.
9 months would be a good amount of time.
Let's say it's 10.
Okay.
What about 8?
All right. So
let's just say it's in the far distance. It's beyond the usual 30 to 60 day closing.
Yes, they want an extended closing. And this is quite common during the winter months, our winter season months, because not everybody wants to move during a snowstorm. So what they do is they'll delay or push out a closing, which typically then gives you a spring closing date, which is why a lot of times we're so busy in the spring, because properties that went under contract in the winter. I am assuming what you're looking for is if you're a seller and someone wants a delayed or deferred closing, it's the buyer's request. One of the things that you should do or make sure is done is request a lot of skin in the game. So a large deposit that becomes a non-refundable large deposit, so that if they do decide to walk away from the transaction closer to closing, because this has happened to me, you've already made another purchase, you run the risk of being breach of contract in your property going forward, or you've booked a moving truck. There's a lot of expenses and things that you incur as a result of a move. You should make sure that the deposit is large enough to maybe make it a little less painful, because that, regardless, it is going to be a pain in the butt and it will be painful.
So what's a large deposit?
So a large deposit, I know we're going to be debating this out, but
10 to 20%.
Okay, so you're saying 10 to 20%.
What would you say? I can pick a number. It's very easy. 10 to 20%. $500,000 house, I want $100,000 down. Non-refundable. Yeah. So if you walk 9 months later, I'm sitting here keeping this property off the market. I've made plans. I'm paying $20,000 to move all my stuff to another coast. I want to make sure there's more than $1,000 down. You'll typically see a lot of deposits in PEI, and I'm sure this is happening in other markets, $1,000 to $3,000, because they can e-transfer it. It's a nonsensical deposit if your closing date, the further the closing date is, in my opinion, the bigger the non-refundable deposit should be. And the second thing I would strongly suggest you do in this particular case is have a lawyer review the contract to make sure it's bulletproof.
Absolutely. I would also agree with that. And I would make sure, what's to say then, Michael, flip this around and say, the buyer puts down a big deposit and the seller ends up changing their circumstances. We've actually had a situation where the seller ended up having a stroke and couldn't end up closing on the property. And now what do you do with, for these buyers? Because they could not close now. It was in a situation where the seller could not sign. They were in the hospital. It just went on for months. And unfortunately, the buyers had to find some other place.
They couldn't tape a pen to the seller's hand to move her arm?
No, they could not.
Well, then you'd have to pursue it with the lawyers.
So
hopefully they come to some form of agreement.
Yeah. And again,
good luck with that.
In your contract, as much as, because we just conveyed it from a seller's point of view to say you want a non-refundable deposit. But what if you're a buyer with a lengthy closing? If for any reason the seller, does not close on the property, that your deposit is 100% refundable. And at the very least, just be grateful that you're getting your full deposit back. Again, these are conversations to have with your lawyer, But a long closing, you have to, depending on what hat you're wearing, are you the buyer or are you the seller, you want to be protected.
So just have something in the contract that if the seller decides not to close the deal, there is some financial liability there. That would solve that.
That's exactly what I just
If
said.
the purchaser's willing to sign, or the seller's willing to sign off on that they're going to give the purchaser 50 or 100 grand or whatever if they default on the contract. But then you go looking for that money and then you can't find the money and it just turns into a big mess.
Yes. Well, a non-refundable deposit, like I said, at the very least, if it is the client, the seller client that defers or breaches the contract and doesn't close for any reason, and there are life circumstances and situations where that can happen. In that circumstance, I would say no, a lawyer should probably be part of the writing or preparing of that particular clause, just to say that the buyer's deposit would be refundable in that instance.
Right. So we've covered that, but what about the seller? You could ask the seller to put money in trust. But again, good luck getting that signed.
Yeah, good luck. And good luck getting a seller to commit to that. Majority of the time, just so that the consumers and our listeners, majority of the time, this is not problematic. I will just say we don't usually run into issues. Majority of property transactions do convey and close. However, the purpose of this discussion is having a very lengthy closing and how do you protect yourself. And the purpose of this podcast is to make sure we're not biased on one side or the other. It's all about hopefully educating and informing our listeners that these are the conversations and questions that they need to have or things they should be considering to protect themselves.
The further the closing is out, the more the inherent risk would be that it doesn't close.
Well said.
Thank you. Moving along to AI Corner. Patty, I know you've been super excited about AI Corner, a feature of some of our podcast episodes. Well, today we're going to talk about one of the practical uses for AI, which people may or may not be aware of. You're obviously familiar with Claude, my second personal assistant.
The AI software that I introduced you to, yes, I am familiar with it.
Right. So Claude has its typical user face on your browser, but it also has a desktop version you can download and use. And the interesting thing about this is it actually integrates with your desktop files, your operating system, and it also has plugins or things you can add to programs like Excel that makes it extremely powerful. And I'll just give you a couple quick examples. Example number one, I'm reconciling a bank account, or actually it was a credit card. So I took the CSV file, the raw data file, downloaded it from the banking website. Typically, I would go in there, I would delete the first couple rows, I would delete a couple different columns I don't need, I would sort it from highest number to lowest number, then I'd do my bank reconciliation. Well, the other day I thought, why am I doing this manually when I can get Claude to do it? So I've trained Claude to take this data file, format the data for me, and export the file. So not only can you use it for stuff like that, but Patty and I are also using it to disseminate sale information. For instance, someone says, what's this building lot worth? Usually this would take sometimes an hour or two to sort of form a conclusion, especially when you're dealing with building lots that are all over the place. Well, AI can take that data and convert it into something that's far more understandable and do it a lot quicker than any human can. So that's AI Corner for today. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm just curious as to how you do your credit card reconciliation, but
what I
seems
do,
like a lot of extra steps that you take.
if you have a credit card bill or a bank statement that's several pages long, most people will take the statement and they will reconcile it with their accounting package. So if you're looking for a transaction from Walmart for $123, they go down. There are 3 pages of statement to locate that transaction. Is that what you do?
I don't make that many purchases in a month's
Let's just
time.
assume you did. It was Christmas.
But I would be able to pinpoint and say, I know I bought this in November, and grab that statement.
Oh!
And then the receipt is attached to it, because that's how I do my accounting.
So getting back to the reconciliation process,
Yes.
which is just comparing the bank statement with your own computer program, typically something like Quicken, QuickBooks, Sage, whatever you're using. Typically, people will look at the pages and pages of information looking for this transaction and reconcile it against their banking software. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. So what I do is I sort it from the highest number to the lowest number, or you can go from the lowest to the highest. So now when I look for that number, it's a lot quicker to find it.
Okay.
Isn't that ingenious?
Yes, if the system works for you, then that's all that matters. Yes.
It
So
makes
that's how
things
you
a
utilize
lot
AI.
quicker.
Okay.
That's just one example. The point being, it doesn't matter what kind of information or data you're manipulating, whether it's a bank statement, it's real estate sales data, it's whatever, financials from a company. AI can interpret that data now directly through Excel or through text or whatever data form you're using.
So all I'm going to add to this AI corner is just please use AI responsibly. Don't give personal information in there, and don't just decide that you're going to talk to it all day.
Making it your best friend?
Yes, we are advocates of using it responsibly. That's all.
I have a question for you, and this is what I can't understand this, and I know you're sort of a psychiatrist, psychologist, hobbyist. I get these clients maybe once a year or so, and I'm sure you do as well, that are non-communicative. And they'll phone you up, they'll say, I want to list my property, I want it on the market right away, I don't want to delay this process. So you text them back and they disappear for 4 days.
Yes, that happens.
I have probably a couple clients right now that are like this. You'll ask them a question and they disappear for 3 or 4 days, and then it's like, well, are we getting this up and running? It's like, well, 4 days ago I asked you 3 questions. And you never responded. Like, where do these people go? Do they just get the text, turn their phone off, and go on vacation for 4 days?
Yeah, or I don't understand it. I have had a recent client who I sent off an email. It's like a conversation we're having. You'll make a statement, and then I make a statement, and it's back and forth. Well, email, you would assume, is conversation. So I would send an email, they would send a response, I would send a response. And I was the last one to send a response. It was kind of like a tag, you're it now. And I get about a week and a half later, hello, we're still alive here. And I didn't understand what that was implying, because I was the last one to communicate. But regardless of that, yes, if you're in the midst of having a conversation or requesting the services of somebody, which is what real estate professionals are, we're providing a service, at least let us know that I'm going to be away in a few days, or I'll get back to you next week, or just something, so that, like you're saying, you're not kind of hanging there going, what's going on? Okay, well then I'm just going to move on and service the clients who are active and ready to go and expect me to be on top of things. Those are the ones that are going to get my attention. But I do find it's like our culture here now in Canada, we're kind of losing that conversation ethics, if you will, where, again, you say something, I say something, and it's a conversation back. We just have no regard for people. We're so absorbed in our own worlds that we don't even think about the other side.
With that, we're going to wrap it up, because apparently they're sweeping the parking lot we're parked in, and we need to shut down the studio.
They're kind of walking, looking in the windows.
They are. And we've got a couple from, I think, Louisiana parked here in their RV beside us. So I hope they're having a great time on the island. They've got great weather. Patty, that's it.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Michael and Patty Show, otherwise known as MAPS, PEI's podcast that helps guide and navigate you through the buying and selling and a little bit of Prince Edward Island. We appreciate each and every one of you for downloading and listening to us sometimes banter back and forth every week. If you're looking for an extension of this, we do have the Moving to Prince Edward Island spelt completely out from the Michael and Patty podcast. It is a private Facebook group. Michael will be the one that admits you in if you submit a request to join the group, and it is filled with information, little summaries of every single episode, so what you can expect. We have a Toolbox Tuesday that is filled, and it's a whole toolbox on different topics and subjects, as well as other engaging posts and that. So thanks again for listening, and hope everyone has a safe and wonderful summer ahead.
Have a great day.